My name's Diana Martin. I'm the Executive Director here at Hourglass, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's First Friday Forum on Public Education. Today we're very fortunate to be joined by three of our local superintendents, Dr. Ella Musser from Cocalico, Dr. Brian Troop from Ephrata, and Dr. Keith Miles from the School District of Lancaster. Today we're going to cover a variety of topics that impact public education. We're going to start with a couple of the challenges facing our local schools, but we're also going to cover some of the innovative ways that they're preparing students for the future. If we have time, we're going to briefly address the new state budget that was just passed, which included a $1.1 billion increase for public education, and hear what that means for local students for the upcoming school year. And after our panel discussion, we will have time for some questions from all of you. So thank you so much for being here and really eager to hear what's on your mind. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our First Friday Forum sponsors, Rogers and Associates. I know we have Jeremy here today from Rogers, so thank you so much for making the forums possible, as well as the Ware Center for hosting us, and Shoemaker, who provides our live streaming services. We have quite a few folks who are also watching online today, so we'll wave to them and hope that they're on a tropical beach somewhere watching along with us. So with all of that, I think we're ready to get started. You guys feeling ready? And appreciate you all being here. This is kind of like the brief time of year where you also get to go on vacation. So really appreciate all of you being here. So like I mentioned, we're going to start off by talking about some of the challenges in public education. If you follow along in the news, there's quite a few issues that are impacting our schools. And I asked each of our superintendents to pick one topic to address that they're seeing and that's impacting them. And Dr. Musser, I'd love to start with you. One of the areas that you're very passionate about is the staffing shortages that we're seeing in schools. And just to provide some context to our audience, the Department of Education recently released data that Pennsylvania's public schools were short over 2,000 classroom teachers last year. We're also seeing shortages in other roles like paraprofessionals. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the root cause of that and also how you're working to address it at Cocalico?
Sure. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I'm glad to see so many familiar faces. I'm pleased to be talking about public education and having an interest in that. I would say the field of education is certainly not alone in facing the staffing issues. I know I hear it from our business leaders all the time. But I do think that one of the things that we've noticed in education long before we were hearing from our local businesses is that in 2008, when the economy was really impacted by a number of different factors, school budgets were also impacted. And so one of the things that many of the schools did in an effort to control their budgets, as teachers were retiring, they were not filling those positions. And so we had a plethora of students who were graduating from college with education degrees who had no hope for a job for quite a long time, actually. And what began happening is that high school students were not encouraged to go into education because it was so difficult to find a job. And so you can imagine that the long-term effect of that is that we just did not have a number of people graduating from college with education degrees, and those that had been waiting around to get a job found other occupations. So that was something that was looming. We were very aware of those trends. We didn't necessarily experience it in Cocalico until the pandemic hit. And then we felt it almost immediately. And anybody who was reading the newspapers at that time knew that public schools were facing a lot of turmoil. And so the climate and the culture, was a little more challenged than what we had been used to experiencing here in Lancaster County. And so with that, we did have, some people who chose to resign and find other occupations over that time. And we did have a hard time filling those positions compared to what we had experienced in the past. So our biggest challenge, though, we found ways to adjust and adapt, but the biggest challenge really ended up being our substitutes in almost every single role. So if we had food service workers who were out for a sick day, we had a hard time filling that. If we had paraprofessionals that were out, if we had office staff or teachers that were out, substitutes of every position were really, really hard to find because we were having a hard enough time staffing it and hiring people as employees, but it was even more difficult to have that backup set of staff who were willing to fill in on an occasional basis. So we did a number of things. We created promotional videos, we talked to people, tried to recruit people, but I honestly think one of the most effective strategies was we were having a lot of people at our board meetings right over that time, and we spoke very openly about, you know, anybody who could pitch in and help as a substitute in any of those roles, we would very much welcome them to join our forces. And through that, we actually had a large number of parents who did become employees and people who had college degrees who chose to be guest teachers and serve as substitutes and get into our classrooms. So that was a huge help. At the same time, we started thinking about long-term strategies and what we could do. So in time and with a lot of help from our leadership team, the school board, IU13, Millersville University, the Department of Ed, HAC, and Educators Rising, there are a couple of solutions we've put in place. We've created a parent-to-teacher program in coordination with HAC and Millersville University so that hours spent in our classrooms can count as credit toward education degrees, and we have 3 individuals who are now ready for their student teaching as part of that program. We've hosted a Future Educators Breakfast for high school students who are interested in exploring a career in education, and we've talked to nearly a dozen of them about the types of opportunities that exist within the organization, either immediately after graduation or if they choose to obtain a degree. We have worked with the rising educators and created an elective for high school students, juniors and seniors who are exploring education, and they can get credit for a course. We have a very, very passionate teacher who's teaching that course, so I'm excited. We have 18 students signed up for that course. We've continued to promote service learning opportunities for high school seniors to work with teachers at all levels, and that's part of their pathway to graduation. Every year we have dozens of students who participate. We held a series of aspiring leaders work sessions for 22 interested faculty to explore opportunities in leadership positions, and many of them are now enrolled in principal certification programs. And we adjusted our administrative benefits packages to include incentives for earning advanced certificates and degrees for district-wide leadership positions. So 5 of our administrators are currently involved in advanced coursework for that. So in addition to some of those concrete actions, we also realized we needed to really focus on creating a warm, welcoming, and supportive environments for our students, our staff, and our parents so that when they talk about us positively, and that will help to recruit more people into our organization. So I'm proud to say that when we do post teaching positions, the list of our candidates almost always includes Cocalico graduates or Cocalico parents. And when we do hire for professional positions, the individuals we employ are typically employed for the duration of their careers. So with all those things in place, coupled with a very strong ownership and deep commitment from our staff and community, I have great confidence that we'll be able to move forward with success into the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, any other thoughts on your current staffing levels that you want to chime in?
Thank you. Hearing everything that Ella was describing that's happening in Cocalico, I know a lot of districts have similar, but that's quite a comprehensive list that Cocalico has underway. That could be a whole hour of conversation, honestly, just that topic. I just wanted to point out one perspective that maybe those not in education might not have, is we're the only industry that we have 13 years to sell our profession on our future hires. We see them from kindergarten through 12th grade, and I think a lot of the decision-making process for high school students when they're thinking about a career, they're influenced by their family, they're influenced by their peers, but they're also influenced by the culture of the high school that they're in, of the middle school that they're in. And when they hear about their teachers being ridiculed at a board meeting for something that they did or said that they thought was right, that they made a mistake, or falsely claims being made against, that hurts the future prospects of those kids. Why would I want to do that? I can make more without a college degree in a trade. I can. There are a lot of other options that they have now that are competitive with a teaching career. And so the more they see teachers being criticized, and it's not surprising that even though we have those 13 years, that we're having less and less students pick education as a career option afterwards. So our focus has been on a lot of the tactical things that Ella shared, but also just an overall improvement of culture for teachers. Teachers should be joyous in front of the classroom. They should love their job. Kids should be able to tell that they love their profession, that it is great, it's rewarding, that they're respected. So trying to promote that sort of culture within our buildings is one of the strategies that I would add to the list.
Yeah, they'll turn it on for you. You got it.
Thanks. Good morning or afternoon. So the Educator Rising program we have in our district as well. It's been a pleasure to see our young people, our seniors and juniors. They're in our elementary classrooms. They're leading lessons. Our class president, she is one of those Educator Rising students. She gave a speech at graduation all about education. We also celebrated 30 students who are on a pathway to becoming a teacher, and we have 30 behind those 30, so now we're up to 60 students. So we're getting the word out as well that teaching is a great profession, and folks are catching on. We have a waiting list for the number of students that want to be on that CTE pathway.
Okay, amazing. So follow-up for you, Dr. Miles. You recently shared with me that one of your challenges at the School District of Lancaster is ensuring student safety and addressing mental health. You're not alone in that concern. The Pennsylvania School Board Association recently listed mental health as the #1 challenge for school districts. Can you walk us through a little bit of kind of what you're seeing on the ground and how you're tackling that issue?
Sure. So I had an incredible opportunity as a new leader in my district to visit schools, talk to teachers and students, and ask them, what are the challenges that you're facing? And consistently, our young people said, mental health and safety came up. You'd be surprised when it comes to devices. Our students talk about an over-reliance on technology. We think it's all exciting. The more tech we put in the students' hands, the better. But students said they're on screens at home, they're on screens in class. It's too much. We're having trouble concentrating. So, we peel back the layers and find out what are some of those things that are contributing to the mental health challenges. And I think we all can agree, both for staff and students, technology, screens, we have lots of information at our fingertips at all times, which helps in one sense. It keeps us all connected. It's good for information. But at the same time, our students feel if something happens in Texas, it could happen to them. So when we ask them the question, do you feel safe? And every superintendent wants students to say, absolutely, we feel safe in school. But that's actually, our students' perceptions of safety has actually declined since the pandemic. We use F&M research to poll our students, and they've been doing that for 15 years. So we were able to look at that decline during COVID. Of course, the definition of safety changed during that time. Now we're talking about getting COVID. Are you safe from the virus? Now, coming out of COVID, we want to peel back and the layers and figure out what students are talking about when they're talking about safety. And they're talking about the things they're seeing on the internet. They're talking about things that are fueling their timelines. They're seeing violence. They're seeing students at other high schools or other schools fighting. They're seeing mass shootings all over their timeline. So Senate Bill 1207 was introduced, and we're all familiar. It's looking to limit access to screen time during the school day. And Personally in our district, I'm sure that will have a huge impact on students' ability to pay attention, students' feelings, their social emotional well-being will all improve as a result of that. And students will get back to just being, social amongst each other as opposed to being glued to their devices. So, mental health, we've done a lot in our district. We have social workers across every school. We were able to do that with our COVID funds, and we're able to maintain that, luckily, with the infusion of additional funds into education. Our teachers are saying that certain students need a higher level of support than what they can provide in the classroom as it relates to their mental health needs. And so our social workers can get families in contact with agencies and additional supports. We have an SEL curriculum for all students to help students stay in touch with when they need support, how to reach out. So those are just some of the things we're seeing. I will like to say that on this latest survey, our middle schoolers went from 58 to 70% of students responding favorably that they do feel safe. So just 1 year of talking about it and raising the issue, we saw improvements at the high school, 61 to 70%. So a 9% increase in students who feel safe in the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Miles. I'm going to ask a follow-up to Dr. Troop, and before I do, we should just quickly recognize Dr. Troop was the Superintendent of the Year last year in Pennsylvania. So, we like when our schools make us look good here in Lancaster, so congratulations on that. Dr. Troop, we heard how social media can impact students' mental health, but we know there also is a role for technology in the classroom to help prepare students for their futures. How are you thinking about emerging technologies like AI, and what opportunities does technology present for educators?
Yeah, thank you. Everything that Keith said about the negatives of social media and of exposed screen time, and really The Anxious Generation is a book that a lot of the research is shared within, and I think that's what Senator Almond actually looked to model some of his legislation. We see technology as sort of neutral. How it's used makes all the difference. It can be a great tool. I mean, we have how many 30 people tuning in right now via technology that we didn't have 10 years ago. So that's helpful to them. That's a positive. Technology is not inherently good or bad, or it's inherently both. When we look at technology through kind of three impact areas where we as educators feel a responsibility to respond to. First of all, we use technology to do our business. We connect kids with, I'm looking at some Italo people over there, we connect kids to college and resources that they wouldn't otherwise have. They can see the world. So we can track absences and be predictive about what we can intervene before there's a need for intervention, so that we prevent that need for intervention. And we track attendance and tardiness and some of the indicators of disengagement within our classrooms. We can communicate with home much more effectively through the use of technology than when we were in school. So there's an element of impact of technology on our business, and that's a continued, like AI tutors, where each student could have a tutor informed about that student's levels of reading, math comprehension, with some of the goals and standards and assessments that we use built in, so they can be aligned when there's nobody there for that student to help tutor. They don't have two parents at home, or they don't have anybody at home that can actually help them with that. So how we operate as an industry is affected by technology. And then our teachers, our teachers and how they engage students through the use of technology is yet another impact of technology. So putting computers or laptops in front of every student and not having much interaction with the adult in the classroom, that's not a good use. That's technology that weakens education. But if we can leverage some high quality online engaging lessons with groups of students while we get to attend to and increase our connection with students who maybe don't have those connections in other places in their life, that can be life-changing for some of those kids. So in that sector, again, there's positive and negatives for technology. And then I think the real one that I don't think is being addressed to the level it should yet, we're preparing graduates to be successful in life. We have what we call Life Ready Graduate, which has a list of skills, dispositions, and content knowledge that we think are essential but not tested, but are essential for kids to be successful in life. And technology proficiency is one of those things. We're preparing kids. If you think about our elementary students right now, in the next 10 years, do you think there's going to be advancements in the skills our students need to be successful with AI 10 years from now? There already are those changes right now. We know skills like prompt engineering, that wasn't even a word, a phrase, a concept. Now, to be effective at using AI, you have to be very skilled at the prompt and designing that prompt to get exactly what you want back. And then editing becomes a whole lot more effective. We generally don't have students in the position, like when you were in school, when I was in school, I maybe edited based on teacher feedback between my rough draft and my final draft once. That's generally what I did. Maybe you were a different student than me and did that intuitively, but I suspect not. That's a skill. I think media literacy, because AI can produce content at such a rate and in such a way that it's hard to tell authentic content from content intended to mislead or produce a reaction from that. So media literacy becomes an increased value. So focusing on those things, even though they're not going to help our test scores, is something that I think districts need to do. The test, we cannot wait for the Pennsylvania standards or the standardized assessment machines to catch up to what our students need in a time when AI is doubling and tripling within one calendar year. So the technology impact on what we can use today as educators, how it impacts our students and can engage them to learning, and the adjustments that it makes to the reality we're preparing kids for, all are what I consider the big three for technology impact on education. I look forward to the time, and we're looking at piloting some areas here in this coming school year about how do we give teachers an AI assistant who can learn our district vocabulary and priorities, our portrait of a graduate, and help teachers find resources that connect students when the teacher can't be there. Because we think that's a plus for them, and putting our teachers in a way in a leadership role and using technology will help eventually when I can't believe it's not in our future that we won't have students being issued AI tutors, AI assistants to help do their work and to help support their learning. There's already, Khan Academy has a pretty interesting tool out there, Conmigo, that will not give answers to kids. It's programmed to not give answers, only to redirect towards the goal. So that to me, that's better. That's not like when we had the kids and we were trying to outsmart the AI who cheated on their essay, who like that sort of thing. Like that game, I think it's still being played. AI's winning, but I think asking better questions and having students own the work in real time is maybe a better way to assess, even if AI didn't push us there. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble on my thoughts on technology's impact on education, but
we'll edit it with the AI later. So
touche.
Thank you. You really set us up. We were talking about some of the challenges, and you really set us up for the next part of our conversation, which is about student learning. For anyone who's been watching the K through 12 education landscape, it's been clear that over the last maybe 5-10 years, there's been a real shift from college readiness being the top priority for all students to career readiness being a top priority. How are your school districts thinking about all the pathways that are available to students after graduation? And how are you balancing the needs to meet state mandates and testing with the real world skills that employers are looking for? And maybe you want to kick us off, Dr. Musser. They did tell me I can use their first names, but there's something about talking to a school superintendent that, just Dr. Musser.
Okay, well, I would say this is not something that you take a look at and change in a day, because the college readiness mindset was something that was well entrenched in education, and there were a lot of very defined pathways for heading into college, but not so many defined pathways for heading into a successful workforce experience. And so we did some intensive work probably about 8 years ago, really looking at some of the schools that were actually outside of our area that had gone before and done some work on more of the career readiness and multiple pathways for graduation. And we did make some changes in our high school graduation requirements that allowed for a lot more flexibility with our electives and various ways that our students could achieve graduation requirements. So instead of, for example, 4 exact courses that they needed to take in math, or 4 courses they had to take in science, they have 3 required math courses and 3 required science courses, but then 2 more STEM electives. So that gives them a lot more options. So that's one example. And we did some of the same kinds of things with arts and humanities. We also did a lot of career development at all of the levels, elementary, middle school, high school, service learning, getting our students out into the community and working with various community leaders and businesses. We have about 60 to 75 students every year that participate in CTC programs. And we now hold a college and career fair rather than just a college fair. We have a number of Project Lead the Way courses that allow for engineering opportunities for students to really explore that particular field. And then as we're renovating our buildings, we've had to do a work to address HVAC and lighting and things like that. And while we're doing that, we're also looking at our learning spaces to make sure that there's a lot more opportunity for collaboration and hands-on and inquiry. One of the things that our community in particular wanted to see was we have a lot of manufacturing businesses in the northeast part of Lancaster County. So they really wanted to see us to do some extra work in our tech ed department. So we've expanded. We now have a welding program. We have a metals fabrication. We do a lot with architectural drawing and construction and cabinet making. And we have many of our students who have good jobs right out of high school. And those businesses, some of them are actually paying for trade school or for college. So that's been a really good partnership. Another area that we found was that hospitality was a huge need in Lancaster County, and a lot of interest in the food sciences and the restaurant businesses, and we had a lot of students who were interested. So we actually expanded our family and consumer science programs, and we have a lot of like the food science, nutrition, cooking programs, and then we also have a strand with fashion design and clothing. One of our teachers had worked in New York City in fashion for a while, so we're trying to really expand some of those programs and get our students interested right away in 9th grade, and actually exploring some of that already in elementary and middle school.
I'll let that you sort out amongst yourselves.
Along the same lines of starting young, we just surveyed our 5th graders to see what they were interested in, because we like to start talking about careers early. And a great event at McCaskey is Pick Your Path, but it starts way before our students even step foot into McCaskey, because students are learning about all the programs while they're in middle school that McCaskey offers. They're preparing for their day in the life, which is a field trip where they get to go over to the high school and shadow a junior or senior for an entire day. And once they get to McCaskey, all the sports options that we offer are explained to students. The IB program, we have an AP capstone program, a number of college partnerships where students are able to enroll in dual credit courses. We're talking Thaddeus Stevens, if a student may go the non-traditional route, more toward the CTE courses. And then HAC has a partnership with our high school, as well as Harrisburg University, St. Joe's, Millersville. We talked about the CTE pathway for our early educators through Millersville, but We have pathways for everyone, even cosmetology. I didn't mention we do partner. We send about 100 students to CTC, and that's typically for the programs that we don't have at the high school. Automotive is one that requires, big equipment, and we don't have the space for it, so we send students for that. But the idea is we start early, we find out what students are interested in, and we make sure that that option is available. And if we don't have it, our students can go away to get it, or by the time a student hits their junior and senior year, we've done the planning, we've added the courses, we've recruited the staff. As Ella said, these pathways are changing quickly, and things are happening fast, and so finding staff to have an expertise in certain technologies that can provide these courses for our students, it usually takes about 3 or 4 years, prior to introducing the course. So we try to start the conversation at the elementary level.
Thank you.
We took a different pathway. Back in 2015, we really looked at our mission statement that it ends with inspiring our students to reach their full potential. And then we combined that statement and kind of opposed it to, if we know the jobs that most of our kids are going to have aren't even created yet, how can we do that? How can we prepare them for things that we don't know? So we focused on, well, what do we know about the future that our kids will inhabit? And we know there are some skills and dispositions that are more valuable than what they'll learn in the classroom that we can focus on instilling within them, so that we produce graduates, focus on the career and the pathway their last few years, and help them design a senior year that looks like halfway between high school and whatever's next, and have them experience a senior year that's kind of a onboarding to whatever they're planning next. But at the same time, the result of that reflection was the creation of our Portrait of a Graduate, which I mentioned before, which really it includes things like communication and empathy, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity and innovation, collaboration and teamwork. Because when we talk to our employers and our partners, they didn't care as much about what their GPA was, what their future hires' GPA was, or what they scored on this test or that test, or could they tell the difference between a plant cell and an animal cell and not many cared about those sorts of things. They cared about, can your graduate get the good ideas? By the way, the right answer that everyone has that has a smartphone, the content is no longer a differentiator. So what can you do with that answer when you bring it to the table? Can you get your ideas in play in a team environment? Can you apply it to novel situations and be innovative and help our organization accomplish its goals more efficiently? So we've invested a lot since 2020 or 2015 in really how to embed that into the classroom. How do we highlight those areas where when kids in the classroom are asked to be critical thinkers and creative problem solvers? How do we give feedback on that and break that down so that they can actually become better at that? Because when they're juniors and seniors, they'll be finalizing what they want to, the field that they want to go, and they'll have some taste tests with internships or job shadows and things like that. But if they get there and they're not responsible, they don't have integrity, they don't have any resilience or grit, they're still not going to be great employees. And even if they are, because they know exactly the field and they get the content and they go to the CTC, that content that they left the CTC with is going to become stale at a rate that's faster than it's ever been. So if they can't continually learn, fail, and recover, do hard things, finish what they start, some of those things we believe are more important, and that's what we've really put our eggs in that basket moving forward. The test scores will still be the test scores. There's a compliance model to that. Standardized tests test low-level thinking. Most of the standardized tests, actually, there's an interesting, if you Google Chat GPT 3, I think they have 3.5 and 4 out now publicly, and then they had it take lots of standardized tests, and right now available through AI that exists now, most of the tests that we asked our kids will be aced if they could use AI. If they were good at using AI and were able to use it on every test, they would almost get 100%. I think they would pass the bar. I think the MCAT is in range. So we know that already our kids will have these tools in the real world. We have to change what we're aiming at for them, because filling them with knowledge that they can get on their phone or that they can get by just asking for it through an AI isn't doing them the best we can. We need to prepare kids who are ready to navigate an ever-changing world. They can deal with volatility, that can work together and be better as a teammate. Those are the things we want to instill within our kids, and I think that will prepare them for whatever field they change, and whatever, how many jobs will they have, how many different sectors will they work within during their work career. We think those are transferable. They don't have a shelf life, and they're transferable to any industry.
Building on that, Pennsylvania recently updated its science standards for the first time in over 20 years. We were one of the slower states, but we got there. The new science standards require more hands-on learning as opposed to memorizing lessons out of a textbook. Those standards will go into effect next year. Can you talk about how your school districts are preparing for that change, and what will those kind of science, technology, environmental literacy lessons look like moving forward? Keith, do you want to start? Okay.
So on those listen and learn tours, our students talked about relevance. Hits home for me. They said they love lessons that they can apply. They love hands-on activities. So they don't like sit and get lessons where they're reading about things. And they even put those virtual labs that teachers think are really fun. They want to do the actual hands-on labs. And so our curriculum team right away, they're on a cycle of reviewing all of our different curricula, but want to make sure that our science curriculum, we're getting out ahead of it, professional development for our leaders so that they can be prepared for what to look at in the classroom, what's good quality hands-on learning. I also have the privilege of serving on the STEM Alliance, Executive Director Lawrence here. On the STEM Alliance, we're focused on project-based learning. That's one of the big initiatives that we're looking at. And so I'm glad to be a part of that because we want to be at the forefront of project-based learning. We're already infusing that across our curriculum, so not just in science with the infusion of the required STIL standards, but across all of our different areas. And I'll close with we had an opportunity to partner with the city and the mayor to look at local issues around environmental sustainability, which are embedded in those STIL standards. And so our entire STEM fair this year was all on projects related to local issues. And projects the kids came up with were out of this world around things that they could touch, see, visit, understand, get a deep learning knowledge of it. So the more that we do around making our curriculum relevant, things that kids can see, that's what we're trying to do with our entire curriculum, but specifically to prepare for the STIL standards.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
I'll echo everything Keith just said. I think the connection between the STIL standards and the systems approach, instead of memorizing facts, that's exactly what we're about. And looking at the instruction that leads to that Keith also mentioned was the project-based learning. That's also the best way to have kids work in teams, to think critically, to have not more than one definition of success, and have them be creative and influencers into that success or that project. So it makes project-based learning more relevant, more authentic, and focuses kids on things that are a systems approach instead of looking at memorizing facts and vocabulary. We're happy that the STIL's standards are written in that way. They're kind of catching up to what we think is best instruction.
Well, I will just piggyback on Brian's examples of the profile of a graduate, because I feel like that ties in really closely with what's happening with our science curriculum at this point. We have our own version of that. It's based on the same principles in terms of what are the skills that our students need when they graduate from high school. And for Cocalico, the term we're using to reference that is our EAGLE Pact, and PACT stands for problem solving, adaptability, communication, and teamwork. And what was really interesting when we were working with our business leaders in our community and our teachers and student representatives to define what are the critical skills for graduation and being ready for the workforce or for college, one of the things that everyone kept coming back to, especially those teachers who had worked with our special education groups or with our English learners, they kept saying, these are the skills we are always focusing on. And we realized that actually our advanced learners maybe didn't have as much opportunity for the teamwork and the collaboration and the problem solving, that they were actually the ones that were getting spoon-fed more of the instruction. And so when the STEEL standards came out, our science teachers were very quick to embrace them and say, this is exactly what we need to do. And needed to make very minimal changes at the high school level because we had already been doing some work based on our Eagle Pact. And middle school was the same way. At the elementary level, we're working on revising some of our curriculum and doing more of that hands-on learning. We're realizing that at that level, we need to provide a lot more training to our teachers so that they're comfortable with that. So we've been working with IU13 for several years now, working with some of our teacher leaders to make sure that they feel equipped and ready to teach science in a manner that's much more inquiry-based, has much more of that collaboration, the problem solving, without just reading information from a textbook. So we're really excited, and we feel like it ties in very closely with some of the work that we'd already been doing.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to ask one last question about the school funding, and then we're going to kick it to all of you, so anxious to hear what's on your mind. In the interest of time, I think I'm going to point this to Dr. Miles. Dr. Miles, the School District of Lancaster was a plaintiff in the case that declared Pennsylvania's school funding system unconstitutional last year. Just a few weeks ago, we passed a state budget that included more than $1 billion in new spending on K through 12 education. I'd love to hear your reaction to that budget and what it'll actually mean practically for students this year.
Sure. So $1.1 billion, that's a lot of money, extra new money infused in education. And this is what the lawsuit was all about. It's really about the state taking the lead and making sure that districts get the additional funds. So we're talking districts that aren't able to bring in as much tax revenue and that service students with greater needs, that the state's able to provide us with additional support so that we can provide what our students need. And so in that 1.1 billion, half of it, or about 490 million, is dedicated toward adequacy, which is again the portion that the lawsuit is about, and that is distributed based on district poverty. The poverty calculation, that was something that in the Basic Education Funding Commission, it was calculated based on student free and reduced meals. So on a per student level, that's where you get the number from. At the end, once the legislator negotiated, the calculation turned out to be based on the American, a survey measure, which looks really at community poverty. The American Community Survey is the name of the survey, and it doesn't look specifically at the number of students. So we were looking to get about 10 million, is what we heard from the Basic Education Funding Commission, and Governor Shapiro's budget also predicted about 10 million for us, and we got 6.8 million. In terms of what we budgeted for, we're excited because last year the budget didn't come out until December. We're 6 months earlier, so at least we know going into the school year what to expect. We really need to make sure that we're looking over all our programs. They're all, and this is what superintendents do every year, no matter the budget, make sure that everything you're doing with taxpayer dollars are effective. So you're looking to reroute your money to programs that are going to move your strategic plan and your strategic initiatives. So I say that to say $3 million less than we expected. So we're basically, we were looking to put additional supports in place for our students around intervention supports. And test scores are embargoed officially, but they're coming out, and so we're seeing improvements in performance on PSSA's keystones. We want to continue that momentum, and that momentum we believe has come as a result of those additional supports we've been able to put in place with our federal dollars. Now, everybody know there's a fiscal cliff with the federal dollars, so this additional $6.8 million is super helpful, knowing that all of the federal COVID monies expire next month. So what does that mean for us? We had hoped to offer some additional hands-on learning for our middle schoolers. These are additional elective courses other than the traditional ones like art and music. That'll be delayed until we can have a predictable budget and we know what we're going to get. We don't want to bring on additional staff and programs if we know that they're in a line item that might not be here. They're actually, all those adequacy funds are in a grant line item, which means they're not guaranteed. So, you know, that's one effect. We had planned to hire some additional behavioral specialists to support classroom behavior. That's the #1 concern that teachers have in the classroom. So that's another investment that in the School District of Lancaster will be on hold, and we'll continue with the supports that we have in place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And did either of you have anything else you wanted to weigh in there? And then we'll open up to the audience Q&A.
I can't miss an opportunity to share our disappointment in no real progress on cyber charter funding. Cyber charter, there's actually, I'm giving you assignments to Google like I'm a teacher. There's a Forbes article out just talking about the PA cyber charter system and how crooked it is as far as where the money is actually going. It's taxpayer money being filtered through cyber charters to management companies and owners who are building up a stockpile of resources, mainly real estate in our state. So taxpayer dollars are being assigned to cyber charters regardless of what it costs to educate a student in that cyber charter. They're not subject to the same audits we are, and they're fleecing dollars from taxpayers because we're the tax collectors. It's going straight through, and it's not right. We would save over $1 million a year if we paid what it costs, because after COVID, everyone has a cyber charter school. They're operating one. We learned how to do that. If you didn't already, you had to during COVID. So it's not like they broke ground on a new area, and that's something that they have like a special way to do it. Every time I see one of their ads as I'm watching the news in the morning, just gets me charged up for the day. I think there's a better way to fund it, and I think meetings. There have been numbers pushed out before about, something that would be a reasonable compromise so that students sitting in the same virtual classroom will be costing their home districts the same amount across the board instead of based on what they pay for their students, like in a higher affluent area versus another. So that system's completely broken, and lots of people have said how broken it is, but we can't ever seem to get it across the finish line in a budget. So with your influence, maybe bringing that topic up would be helpful.
And I would echo that. The two things that we talk to our legislators about very often has to do with the cyber charter school funding. We have our own program, have had it for a while. Our own teachers are involved in providing tutoring and support for students who need that help, and it's tied right into our graduation requirements. The other thing that I often talk about with our legislators, and I invite them into our classrooms so that they can see it for themselves, is our special education needs and the requirements and the mandates around that. And so whenever they're talking about voucher programs and that money going to private schools or other institutions, one of the things that's very unique for public education is that we educate every child. And the cost of educating every child and fulfilling the mandates and the legal requirements looks very different for us than it does for any of the private schools. And I want to keep that in front of them as well and see the classrooms for themselves. So again, any influence you have. As far as the billions of dollars that went into education, we really didn't see any of that in Cocalico. We were fortunate to have some of the pandemic fund relief, and were able to access that for a great deal of additional tutoring and counseling and supports, but we no longer are receiving that, and we got $0 when it came to the adequacy gap. And so we really did have to make some hard decisions with our budget this year. You know, we're looking at some creative ways of trying to generate sponsorships so that we can still keep on with some of our programs. But we fall into that category of when they talk about all of the extra money in education, it didn't come our way, unfortunately. So the mindset is there's lots of money for education, but the reality is a little different for us.
Great, thank you. So raise your hand high if you have, and anyone in the room, yep, some questions for our superintendents.
Dr. Troop dwelled much on this, but the question's for anybody that wants to take it. My concern with AI is you can get a lot of false information. And when we're using AI as a teaching tool, how do we also educate for all the false reads? Just this morning, the American Bar Association weekly newsletter has an ethics opinion cautioning attorneys on relying on AI because of the false reads. I haven't read the whole ethics opinion, I'm here. But it was on my feed this morning. And my concern is some of it is garbage in, garbage out. And what do we do about that?
Yeah, I didn't mention too much about the media literacy, I think responsibility we have, because I think they go hand in hand. Whenever you're consuming anything from the media, whether it was in response to the prompt that you created or what's being in your feed on social media, or something that you got as a result, like how to vet that, how to verify that, how to triangulate sources. A lot of those skills, which are being taught in some classes in the high school, like our AP research class does exactly that, and they can verify and vet sources. Not every student takes those classes, but every student's in an environment where they're being fed sometimes false information, whether it be through social media, the regular mainstream media, or in response to a prompt entered to an AI. So yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it goes just like you would vet your media outlets. I don't know who your feed comes from, but it's probably from a source that you trust. That you.
This morning,
Yeah.
right out of the American Bar Association's weekly news.
Right.
This is my mailbox.
So you would trust reporting in that.
Well, they are just reporting ethics opinion.
Okay.
Just handed out by.
Yeah, I think we have to educate our students into trust how to research and establish sources that they can trust, and weeding out misinformation, and that happens on a whole source. Like, okay, this is a trusted source, or this is not, and then within that, because sometimes they even make mistakes, that the facts that they're getting from any of those sources, and I would put the results of an AI in the same classification as a media source, and treat them the same way, where you're vetting that and you're not trusting it 100%, and looking for ways to triangulate. They said this, is that number found anywhere else? Is that reasonable, like within that? So I think that's a lot of the critical thinking and problem solving that we were talking about as being crucial.
To answer your question, my trace back is the feed was from American Bar Association, coming from the American Bar Association Journal, which published the actual ethics opinion. Because all of us are, I think most people that are inclined to come here are inclined to be very jaded about what they are getting on their media feeds.
I've got another question right over here.
Actually, I do want to follow up whether there's anything specific about media literacy, an actual course. But I need to say thank you. This has been encouraging to me. I have this plea that we have to stop talking about careers and jobs and higher education as an either or. Okay? It means educators, you know, teachers, but particularly business leaders and particularly legislators. So the concept of pathways, you know, is encouraging, you know, to me. So thank you for what you're doing there. And back to media literacy. Are there specific courses in the high schools about media literacy, or is it covered in English or history or?
So I've been in some really interesting social studies classes where students are debating and challenging and discussing digital literacy. It shows up in certain standards, and we're trying to infuse it across English, social studies in our district, because we know we want our students to be, I think it falls under digital literacy, but it's new and emerging, and we're figuring it out as we go. And that's why it's important for our curriculum teams to meet regularly on a cycle. And they're sitting down, and we invite business partners as part of the conversation, because what's new and emerging, we want to make sure that we're getting out ahead of it before the state tells us that we have to infuse this. We're already doing it because it's important.
Dr. Troop, you talked about them. You didn't call them as such, but there's been research in the past that calls the skills that you talked about the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Do you test for how students are advancing in critical thinking? There was, and probably still is, a company out there that does it for executives called Watson Glaser that you might be aware of. So how do you gauge progress across that?
The assessment of those that's a challenge that teachers aren't used to, because, you know, coming out of higher ed and with a teaching degree, some of these skills they're harder to assess, more difficult. So what we have our own definitions, and I could go in too granular for this group, but we have a whole system that teachers tag assignments where teamwork and collaboration was something that they gave feedback on. And we have a rubric for that. We have subsets of sub-skills that look fors within that. And then there's a rubric, a 3-point scale. 3 is proficient, 4 is applying it elsewhere, but we just aim for at least 3. And then what we do within our student information system, our Power School, we wrote a special app for that, where we can actually pull out their problem solving and critical thinking score from art class, from phys ed, from math, from ELA, and get it all together so we can get a cumulative view of how they're doing on that particular skill that's within our portrait. So that just rolled out last year. It's available so parents can log on and see exactly how their kids are doing on those skills. So that's a new development. The challenge remains, and what we're still spending some professional learning time already this summer, and with our launch week coming up in a couple weeks, is how to make those events or those things less like events and more like everyday occurrences. Because I mean, in my remarks to teachers in a couple of weeks, I'm going to say, if you taught a whole week and you didn't have kids critical think and problem solve or work together in a team, what are you doing? Like, what's really happening in that classroom if kids aren't engaging with the content in those ways? So teachers get a little intimidated by, it's something new, I'm putting a score on there, parents can see it. Like, we're trying to lower the bar on that and coming up with some strategies to do that. But the important part is that kids are getting feedback on their performance and reflecting on their performance so they can do better next time at it. Because by the time they graduate, our responsibility is to make sure they're equipped with all those.
One last question back here. Hi, I'm Emma. I work at the library in the city, and this is probably, you have a specific answer for different organizations you partner with, but what can anybody in the city be doing, or anywhere in the county be doing for you? Like, if you have like a couple of tips on just how can we be helping your students or helping your teachers?
We've partnered very closely with the Adamstown Library, and so they've often communicated with us about programs. We've communicated with them about needs. They've created workshops and things like that. Your broader question, I think, how can everybody help us? We have a lot of students who are job shadowing, doing internships, and we've had tremendous opportunities open up for our students because of the open doors that businesses have had. We get really positive feedback from the organizations having students with them, but we also get really positive feedback from the students who are out in the organizations, and it often helps shape their decisions post high school in terms of, is this really a career I want to pursue? Sometimes it's actually not, because they realize it's not at all what they thought it would be. But many times it leads them down that pathway for advancement in that career. So I think everybody working together on behalf of the students and the opportunities has been a huge asset.
Great positive note to end on. So let's give our speakers a round of applause. I just have two quick announcements before everyone runs out the door. Of course, a video recording of today's forum will be on our website. Feel free to share that with folks. That'll be up early next week. We have two upcoming events I wanted to put on your radar. The first is our next First Friday forum. We'll be back here on Friday, September 6th. That will be focused on the arts. We're going to have another great panel for that. And I also wanted to let people know that we have a special community forum coming up. That is on September 10th. We'll be here at the Ware Center down in the auditorium. And it's going to be all about the potential of outdoor recreation for Lancaster County's community and economic development. So if you're hearing a lot of stuff about rail trails and water trails and nature preserves, and you're wondering what's going on with all of those exciting advancements, we're going to have a really great keynote speaker for that from the state's Office of Outdoor Recreation. There'll be food, there'll be wine. You want to be there. You can get tickets for that on our website at hourglasslancaster.org. So hope to see you at one of those upcoming events. Thanks. Have a great weekend.